So I'm going to do that. And I'm also going to live stream us to YouTube to make sure that nobody misses out on our panel discussion. That's a little fiddly bit. I'll get there in a minute. Okay. I think we're nearly there with the live stream. Yes. Okay, great. So I will introduce all of you before we get going with our discussion. So first off, we've got Dr. Rob Szymanek, if I pronounce your surname correctly, Rob?
Almost.
Almost.
It's Szymanek.
Oh, well done. No, not even almost then. So Rob is a London-based music educator and coach who teaches piano, composition and ensemble performance. And since 2020, his work has integrated schema therapy principles using research and training to help musicians overcome unhelpful patterns and unlock greater creativity, confidence and enjoyment in practice and performance. So thanks, Rob, for coming and sharing with us from that perspective. And we have Beatrice Ng-Kessler. Beatrice is a HCPC registered clinical psychologist and schema therapy trainer based in London. She founded the Chinese Schema Therapy Academy, where she provides training and supervision in schema therapy, with a particular focus on the cultural adaptations of schema therapy for collectivist clients. She has also authored the first ever Chinese schema therapy book in Hong Kong. So welcome, Beatrice. Lovely to have you here. And we have Gillian Heath. So you've all seen Jill earlier in the day. Jill is a schema therapist and consultant clinical psychologist working in London together with Tara Cutland-Green. Jill runs the schema therapy training programme with Schema Therapy Associates. Jill is also involved in creating schema therapy textbooks with Helen's startup, who presented earlier in the day. Jill and Helen have got a self-help book on the inner critic coming out next year, and the wonderful creative, what's the title, Jill? Creative Practice in Schema Therapy?
Creative
Methods, which is a fab book. I would highly recommend that. Thank you, Jill, for joining us for the panel.
No, great to be with everyone.
And we've also got Louise, who some of you have met earlier in the day. So Louise Coates is a HCPC registered forensic psychologist with over 30 years experience working with people with complex needs across the UK criminal justice system. Louise has been using schema therapy as her preferred main therapeutic approach for much of that time, particularly with people presenting with severe risks and needs. Louise is a non-forensic private client practice within which she uses schema therapy to heal attachment trauma issues. Louise is also a trainer and supervisor in schema therapy. Thank you, Louise, for joining us.
Thank you.
So I'm going to ask each of you to share for 4 or 5 minutes, maybe a short story or some reflections that gives us a sense of your application of schema therapy in your work. So I wondered, Rob, would I be able to come to you first?
You can, yes, no problem. So I thought I should just give a little bit of a review about how I've used the schema model because it's in a non-clinical setting. So I've been working in music for about 20, 25 years, and I've been practicing since I was very young. And I've had lots of ups and downs in my own musical sort of performance success or not, or whatever. And I came to notice how important well-being was to our ability to perform. But more than that, actually, our ability to learn effectively and practice well and enjoy the experience. So, and find more motivation. So that's been going on for maybe 10 or 15 years that I've been on this path of finding ways to make my lessons and my practice more sort of harmonious and bring about more states of well-being for myself as a musician, but also students. Then I came across, through some research, the schema model in 2020. And I was really struck how brilliantly it articulated the problems not only that I faced as a musician, but also what I saw in my peers and my students as well. So common schemas like unrelenting standards, where you've got the vulnerable child who is nervous, anxious, stressed out under a lot of pressure. And that can really reveal itself through the body and also how we go about making music. And then what I think is wonderful is how the schema model sort of articulates how that comes about. So behind the vulnerable child is the demanding parent mode in this case, with messages of like, you've got to get this right. You can't make this mistake. Work harder. Everybody else is doing this. You've got to do it now. Practice for 15 minutes or else, those kind of things. And those kind of messages are they're in abundance in music education and the wider music culture, unfortunately. And behind that, of course, is the punitive parent mode. So that if you don't meet the mark, then out comes the punitive parent mode. So that's when a lot of people have experienced a lot of self-criticism, frustration with themselves, and that sort of dynamic can lead to all sorts of coping modes as well. So I thought that brilliantly explained that. So you might, in response, go into an over-controller mode so that you work even harder to avoid making mistakes. So that's quite common, but also avoid and protector mode. So completely avoiding practice. And of course, there's a sort of self-fulfilling prophecy in both of those, is that actually you're reinforcing the stress and the pressure, and actually you're making the experience quite negative for yourself, all in all. So I thought that on the one hand, the schema model sort of brilliantly articulated my experience, but also what I see every day with people I work with. And then it's been a bit of a journey for me since then. Sort of, how can I integrate this into my teaching, this knowledge, this know-how, so that I can really help people within the scope of a music teacher and also as a coach. And that's where I would like to draw attention to the other half of the model, which is the positive schemas. So the meeting of our emotional needs, for example, autonomy, playfulness, emotional nurturance, and how this gives rise not to maladaptive schemas, but to positive schemas or adaptive schemas. So that can be things like self-forgiveness. So the ability, when you have a mistake, to actually just forgive your mistakes as you're playing, or self-directedness is another positive schema that's been researched. And so that's the ability to say to yourself, no, I can go at my own pace. I can take this at my own time. I can be in tune with my body, and I don't have to push myself. So what we do in sort of schema-informed tuition is through the teaching relationship, but also through the practice, is we work to meet those needs, and we work to cultivate and amplify those positive schemas. And in a way, what I think it does is it kind of bypasses the negative schemas or that might crop up, or it provides an alternative, a sort of a counterpart. And you keep doing that through your practice, your well-being, because of those positive schemas are going off, your well-being is sort of elevated, you're enjoying it more, you're free from, or you're freer from the sort of demands of the demanding parent mode and the inner critic. And then actually it gives rise for another crucial mode to come up, which is the happy child. So that's when this part of us that's free, enjoying the moment, content, at ease. And that's what we're really trying to get to in both the tuition and the coaching. So that's just sort of a glimpse of that, how I've sort of been working with it. And just to say very briefly that the outcomes for me, I mean, what I think is wonderful, and I think the schema concept really explains this so well, is that you can see shifts in people's ability, their learning ability, their performance ability, from one moment to the next when those needs are met. And that is really, really fascinating and very rewarding to watch and to be part of. And yeah, it continues. So that's just a glimpse there.
Thank you so much, Rob. There's so many things that I want to ask you now. So we're going to have a bit of a discussion after we've heard from each of the panel members. So thank you for your eloquent description of how you're using schema therapy in your music teaching. So Beatrice, can we come to you next?
Yeah, sure. So I'm a clinical psychologist myself, so I have been exploring the cultural adaptations of therapy itself for quite some time, given I myself have a cross-cultural marriage and seeing clients from a diverse cultures and then end up moved to the UK. I'm from Hong Kong originally. And I also particularly learned through my role as the chair of the ISST Special Interest Group on culturally responsive schema therapy. So over the years, I have observed that people from different cultural backgrounds, especially those with multicultural identities, often experience schema therapy in a very diverse way. And that makes sense because schema therapy deals with people have deeply rooted attachment patterns and early unmet needs, which are shaped by their own culture and the family systems. And one case that deeply struck me is involved a Chinese client I began seeing last year. So she came to therapy feeling depressed after a conflict with her adult daughter. Her daughter, who had been diagnosed with borderline personality disorder, was seeing a white schema therapist in the UK. So in her daughter's therapy, she has come to believe that her struggle were entirely caused by her mother's bad parenting. So as a result, she blamed her mother, who then became my client. And sadly, the daughter eventually dropped out of her own therapy after insisting that her mother should get help instead. I feel a lot of empathy for both of them. I don't believe the therapist has any harmful intention, as schema therapy just naturally focuses on the unmet childhood needs and then links to the early caregiving experience. Yet it's very easy for the clients to fall into the narrative of my parents are the reason I am who I am today. At the same time, my client, the mother, was described as controlling by her Western standards. So from an individualistic perspective, her parenting style may indeed seem intrusive and unmatched. But with the Chinese culture there, the authoritative and very involved parenting style is often seen as an expression of care and responsibility. So from her point of view, she was protecting and loving her daughter. Even this may lead to more over-involvement or reduced autonomy. So my job with her is to help her to see the possibility to love her daughter differently, which reflected in how she can love her vulnerable child more differently. The experience reinforced my commitment to bridging the cultural gaps in therapy. Schema therapy was developed in a very individualistic context, but many of our clients come from collectivistic cultures, which values harmony, duty, or family cohesions. Those play a central role. And importantly, collectivism and individualism also are not opposite. They exist on spectrums. So a person can be highly individualistic in one area of life and then deeply collectivistic in another. So these patterns are not determined solely by the ethnicity or the nationality. They intersect with personal, social, and generational factors. So understanding this intersection would help us to see how our clients, not through the lens of our cultural assumptions, but more as a unique individual as they truly are. So that's why I'm coming here today.
Well, Beatrice, thank you so much for describing that so beautifully to us. Thank you.
Thank you.
Again, I've got more questions that I'd like to ask that we'll come back to. So, Jill, can we come to you next?
Yeah, sure. So I'm predominantly an individual schema therapist, apart from some group work I've done in the NHS a little while back. My main experience has been working one-to-one. And so in thinking about the application of schema therapy one-to-one, such a big area, I kind of decided to keep it simple and just think about the 3 things I absolutely love about applying a model. And I do kind of have in mind that there are lots of people who might be thinking, oh, am I interested in learning more about schema therapy? Is this a model that I might be wanting to train in or to get more into? And I thought, well, what drew me to it originally? And I think there are 3 things I'm going to talk to briefly that I think are particularly special about schema therapy and particularly effective. And these will reflect the presentations earlier today too. I think the first thing is how you formulate in schema therapy. I just think the mode concept is so useful. It's so clear, so non-pathologizing, so flexible, so transdiagnostic. And I think it makes a lot of intuitive sense to people. I think like it's just so helpful that you can just start to explore and name with your clients you know, the modes coming up from often simply from the material they bring with a bit of knowledge about them more generally as well. And you can just start to talk about what's coming up, talk about the pattern. And then you can start to talk about how that started for them. How did they start to think and feel about themselves and their place in the world, their early relationships? Loved what you were saying, Beatrice, about thinking within cultural connotations too, like their relational templates slightly more broadly than the family, or taking into account the context of the family, these core relational templates, and thinking about how people have learned to cope and how those patterns play out for them over time. I just think it has beautiful sophistication to it. You can be very nuanced, but there's also clarity to the overall structure of your process in formulating, and structure in some of the prototypes to help you spot the different modes, particularly the different coping modes coming up. And I think that the modes are just an excellent way of making sense of like this wide range of different issues that people struggle with. So you can have like, you know, you might have a client who might have a self-soother mode that drinks to escape feelings of shame when they're alone, for example, or same client, a competitive mode that tries to cope with those feelings by trying to be the best in, say, a work context. But at home, they might brings up more of an over controller mode that's operating to keep the person feeling in charge, even though it might be off-putting for the rest of their family. And so I think you can kind of see how some of the same source feelings, in this case, shame for their little side, come out in these different ways that could be very much like, I don't know, say this person had a diagnosis of NPD and maybe a substance misuse problem. That you've got all these different so-called symptoms, but actually you can understand them as ways that their different parts of themselves are trying to cope with these very painful core feelings and core patterns that keep getting triggered for them in their daily lives. So I think that these ways of formulating, these ways of understanding is just very useful and doable in helping a whole range of people step back with you and just start to understand their different parts in a very validating but also very clear way, and thinking about how their healthy adult might kind of meet the concerns of these different parts in a slightly different way. I'm aware of the time. I'll be brief.
You're okay, Jill.
I do have a tendency to talk too much with my own schemas. My second favorite thing about schema therapy with individual work is the therapy relationship. Or maybe it's my first favorite thing, but equally with formulation. I think it is really, seriously, I think it is beautiful how you can pause in the moment with your client. And you can figure out with them what the tension's about if you're having an interpersonal rupture or a mode's coming up very strongly. Maybe the client's angry with you, maybe they're very critical of you, maybe they're quite attacking of you, or very, very detached. And you can try and explore with your client how the mode's trying to help. And also honestly and authentically sharing a little bit in the service of their interests of what these modes pull in you and how that might link with their other relationships. And I think this is one of the deepest and most profound parts of the model. I mean, my experience is the authenticity of it, although it's not easy, really helps people feel seen, and it can cut through the coping modes and the critics kind of interpersonal assumptions, because for once there is someone who is going to be with them and work with what's coming up, be straight with them about some of its impact and stay with it and work through it. And I think that's that can be very profoundly reparative. Final words on this. My third favorite thing about schema therapy is that, armed with your formulation and your kind of working knowledge of the different methods, of which there are a myriad and always increasing, you can be really creative in finding out with your clients what their different parts need. With you in therapy, and then gradually in their lives more generally. And this is a kind of live experiential learning for the healthy adult. So just at a very concrete level, I've got one client at the moment who has, she's a client with an eating disorder, and being in touch with feelings is very hard for her. And she needs a lot of space in sessions. So I'm much quieter, the sessions are more fluid as she bravely connects with what's going on for her. And very, very different in style and structure and needs compared to another client I've got. He really thrives with quite a bit more energy, more pace, more structure in the work. And both pieces of work are very much grounded in schema therapy, but they look and feel really different because those people are very different and they have very different needs from therapy, and their healthy adult needs to be doing very different things with their different parts. And I think it's really testimony to the need meeting nature of the model that it can do that. And it excites me. I hope it'll excite some of the people we're speaking to, that you have this kind of flexibility. So as a therapist, people watching this, they may be coming from very different models. And I would like to say that the model actually can embrace and welcome different therapeutic styles and different leanings in a way that will also attract different clients. And I think that's all for the good. So
Thank you, Jill.
that's me.
It's lovely to hear your passion. So coming to you, Louise.
Yes, thank you. And thank you very much for offering me an opportunity to talk about forensic application of schema therapy. It's something that is very exciting and can be quite daunting. But I come from a position of this really works. This is a method of therapy that is really accessible to people who have often been excluded from therapeutic approaches. For a long time, the literature was saying, oh, if you're too high risk, then there are no therapies that work with you. If you have psychopathic tendencies, then we can't work with you. You shouldn't be in treatment. And the amazing thing about schema therapy is it actually turns that on its head, because it reconceptualizes psychopathy as modes, and it reconceptualizes people's risk as particular behaviors that come with those unhealthy modes. It comes with a vulnerable child that hasn't had its needs met, has most likely, in the most complex of cases, experienced horrific abuse, and is kind of, the person is trying simply to survive. through their form of offending. So I just love the fact that there is something now that is really accessible for most people that have committed offences. And when I talk about forensic application, I'll come on in a little bit to some of the modes that are kind of pigeonholed as forensic modes, but most of us will come across those modes in our everyday practice anyway. So just kind of hold that in mind, that forensic modes are out there in the community just as much as they are behind closed doors. So I came across schema therapy whilst in a forensic setting, but it hadn't been applied within that setting so far, and I really liked it because it helped me to reformulate a lot of the clients I was working with who were stuck. We have a huge prison population of people that are on indeterminate sentences and don't have the opportunity to progress. They've been told that they can't be released until they've done therapy or in particular interventions, but they can't access those interventions because they don't meet the criteria, which then leaves people in basically schema confirming environments. And so to be able to reformulate somebody's risk and somebody's needs according to the schemas that they've developed as a result of lifelong experiences, and also to be able to understand why somebody is continuing to perpetuate the same behavior problems in different situations through understanding their modes. It's kind of transformed how we work with clients, and we have across the criminal justice system, we have a lot of services that are specific for people who have presented with personality disorder traits, so not necessarily been diagnosed with a full-blown personality disorder, but it enables people with kind of complex presentations to access therapeutic approaches that are kind of a bit more niche and that meet their needs in a different way. And schema therapy is one of those key methods of intervention. A lot of the time in forensic settings, it's individual therapy. And often it's fairly short term, even though you're working with really complex people, because there just isn't the resources for kind of long therapeutic approach. However, there are some settings, one of which was my previous employment, where schema therapy was delivered over 5 years, both in individual and group settings, which was phenomenal to have that length of time. And it meant that we could use schema therapy to, first of all, work with establishing a therapeutic relationship with people that have never had healthy attachments or relationships, and then to work with a very damaged, frightened, abused child mode, and do a lot of kind of trauma intervention, and then to work with the offending modes. So forensic modes are seen as the bully attack mode, enraged child, conning manipulator, a predator mode, a paranoid over controller, and a self-aggrandizer. And there's also a pseudo vulnerable child mode that we sometimes come across as well, which is a little bit like a conning manipulator mode. So kind of like taking somebody through the journey of their life, starting with where they're at now, taking them back to where they started and how they ended up being where they are now, and then moving forward through a reparative journey. And I really love using schema therapy with clients, because what we can do is understand their offending as parts of them, as these modes that they've used, and why they've developed those modes and why they're no longer useful, and then separate that out from the little child parts of them and the healthy adult part of them that has been either squashed or suffocated by these other modes. and then work with that. So often clients in forensic settings are seen as their offence or offences, not as the person. Schema therapy just blows that open and says you're a person first, made up of all these different modes, and we know why that's happening, and we're going to work with you with that. And it's just so brilliant to bring empathy and compassion into somebody's life who has perpetually felt disgusted, rejected, unwanted, and open to abuse. So it's a really powerful process for people to go through.
Thank you so much, Louise.
Could I just add
You've got
one thing?
more? Yeah, of course.
I wanted to pick up on Robert's thing about using a schema-informed approach. So if you haven't got loads of time to work with somebody, then it's brilliant to just hold in mind what different things might be going on for somebody schema and mode-wise. And you can work with somebody just with a little flavour of it rather than full-blown therapy. Sorry, Jo.
Okay.
Thank you.
No need to apologise. So, gosh, I hear themes around the mode model and how we can apply it in so many different contexts, different scenarios. I hear about how we have to sort of think about the way in which those modes have developed, thinking systemically in terms of culture. I hear about relationships between parents and children. I'm sure for you and Rob as well as Beatrice, thinking about the way that schemas and modes interact between partnerships within people's lives. So I wonder what's resonated for you as you've sort of listened to each other. Are there some themes that you've noticed link together, or questions you've got for each other? Beatrice, let's go for you first. It's the unmuting.
Okay, so when I heard about Rob's sharing, about the unrelenting standard and about the primitive paramour on behind it, that sounds totally resonate with the cultural background that I'm coming from. So I feel very strongly about the music education that you have observed, and that phenomenon is so much relatable to me. And a lot of the clients who I'm serving from those cultures. And the work for us is like almost like a little revolutionary, like you're changing some kind of phenomenon out there, because it's so big when it's actually the context, right? If the unrelenting standard is the context, right? It's like your music education is the context, everyone being that way. So same thing, like in the culture, this is the context, everyone being that way. So perfectionistic over controller mode is often mistook as healthier mode. So you are reinforced when you are in that over controller mode, and you appreciate it, you're rewarded. And then majority people have the same value. So it's very, very difficult for us to strengthen the healthier mode. So I really appreciate what you have shared about the positive schema, and how when you are focusing on the positive schema, you are bypassing those schemas somehow. So it's inspiring for me. Thank you.
Thanks, Beatrice. Rob?
Well, I was just going to say, well, thank you very much. Yes, and in response, and I suppose linking it back to what Jill was saying about the relationship. So I see that the teaching relationship and the coaching relationship is really, really important. And I think that that's quite, that can be different from other coaching models, actually, when the client is seen as able to sort of, they've got all the resources to work it out. Well, we do see that the client has their resources, but I think also that those resources are cultivated through the relationship, and those positive schemas are cultivated through the relationship. So I see, when you were talking about it there, yes, all those unrelenting standards are going on in the background, but I see it as a kind of, we're in this kind of protective bubble that's formed through the relationship. And my experience is, for myself and with my students, is that bubble can then hopefully translate to when they're on their own, and they're doing their practice, they're doing their performance, those unrelenting standards are still going on, but they can just be in that more protected bubble, or they can know how to get rid of the demanding parent, the punitive parent. Yeah. So I just wanted to sort of link back to what Jill was saying, because I thought that was such an important part as well, but thank you.
Thanks, Rob. Jill, did you have something that you wanted to?
Oh, I've got so many, so many thoughts. I found you all so inspiring. It's like it's just all kicking off for me. But I think I guess all of us have been talking about and at different levels in different ways, which is just fascinating. How the therapy relationship and the model can give us an opportunity for like a different attachment figure, really. So I was thinking about inner critics as like this very threat-focused attachment figure. And they might have cultural elements to that, thinking about what you were saying, Beatrice, that can actually be very well-meaning in a way for many of our cultures, but that they can become so amplified and so pressurized and so narrow with such a sense of threat that you get kind of you sort of, it cuts off your thinking and feeling, your flexible part of you. So Rob, when you were sort of saying about like this bubble, and actually equally Louise, what you were saying about creating space for the whole person to get out, to find a connection that is something, it's like stepping out of that threat focused place. And I noticed as we're talking, it's just so like I'm aware there are quite a lot of people here, and I'll be totally open to being someone who suffers from a bit of performance anxiety, but I don't feel it so much because all of our healthy adults are here thinking about things from a need meeting stance, and I think that's just transformative.
I love those ideas, Jill. Thank you. Louise, have you got some things that you were thinking about that were occurring to you as we were talking?
Thank you. I absolutely loved listening to everybody's individual kind of relationship with schema therapy. And it got me thinking about the use of ourselves within the therapy relationship, and particularly around limited reparenting. And I suppose it's more of a question really about how you make use of your own kind of character and your own personality style with your clients, and what your experiences have been of that. Because for me, originally it would have been a really risky thing to think about bringing myself into the therapy room with predators and dreadful modes like that. But over time, it's just the most wonderful experience of genuinely being me. With all my kind of flaws and craziness and quirky stuff. And so I really enjoy that about schema therapy, but I was curious about how you involve yourself with that.
Sorry to pipe in, but I'm just, one of the things that I really love about the schema model is actually doing your own self-work.
Yeah.
So actually knowing your schemas and your own triggers, and actually what's going on with the vulnerable child, what your unmet needs have been, what modes have coming out. And I think really just, continuously sort of tuning in, not only to what's happening with the client, but actually what I'm feeling as well. And being able to map out what different parts of me are coming up, and noticing, oh, okay, because I've also got my own unrelenting standards. So there's my own demanding parent coming in. There's my own over-controller trying to get everything right. But actually that's putting pressure on my client. So I need to step back. So that's the thing that was coming to my mind as well. And definitely sort of sharing different parts of myself. But I suppose that's the first thing that was on my mind really there.
Oh, that's lovely. Thank you.
Beatrice?
Yeah, and I totally agree with what you just said, Rob. And I want to add something. I often face the question is, how is the healthy adult model look like in a collectivistic culture key person, right?
Yeah.
And that is the key, for me, we being healthy adult in the therapy room is assumed, right? And And that's what Louise, you said, the relationship that we build from being authentic and with our client itself is very therapeutic. But what is the healthy adult mode? And it's so related to the context. And in my experience, for people from a collectivistic culture, you need a bigger space. What I mean is you need to hold more tension. You know, when the therapy coming from an individualistic background, we assume, for example, equal footing, much more than the culture coming from more collectivistic side of it. You know, like the power imbalance between the therapist and the client. This is just one of the examples, like how we need bigger space is to holding the contradictions. For example, like holding not just to see your own mole and so, but also like how the clients may navigate in this relationship. How can I make the clients feel a little more comfortable to tell me something? How do I address the clients trying to fish my validation, which may lead to underreport their symptoms or problems? How can I facilitate them to speak more authentically, even risk a little bit more, that I may invalidate them in their mind to tell me a little more about what they really feels like, or maybe disagree with me. So those are things that I need to work on. You know, all those things that's unspoken, but I need to work on, you know, in whatever ways that I can, in the gesture, in the environment, in how I present myself to them. And that's why I would say, you know, that space becomes, we need to cultivate that bigger space within us as a healthy adult.
Lovely.
Mm.
Jill, I wonder what that Louise's question
Yeah.
brings up for you.
Yeah, it's so fascinating. So I have Wendy Bahari in my head at these points. She wrote in a chapter on empathic confrontation where it doesn't need to be perfect. It just needs to be real.
Mm.
And she was talking about the therapy relationship, and I think no matter how experienced or skilled you are, it's really not easy working at that level. It's like, unless you're a kind of Zen master, you know, our own stuff does get triggered. We're in a relationship with someone, admittedly a therapeutic relationship, and we need to feel some of this stuff. And I think so I really kind of carry her words with me. And often, if I'm really honest, I think some of the most profound work I've done, particularly where the really tough interpersonal stuff's going on for someone, that it's when it's actually when I haven't been the perfect therapist. So it's when I haven't really wanted to engage with someone. You know, I've been going through the motions with a technique because I'm frustrated or my own modes are triggered. And then they notice, and they notice. And then you're at a point where it's got real.
Yeah.
And you can take a moment.
Mm.
And you can really in a contained way, in a manageable way, strong enough way, talk about what was coming up for them, what was coming up for you, how you might want to navigate it differently. And you've been brave enough to not be perfect, to not know everything, to not be just always having a technical solution, but to face it with them. And it usually does. Often some of their profoundest fears are triggered by your imperfect response, by your disengagement, for example. And they get a very different experience of what was going on for you and what you might do together. Yeah, that was what your question triggered for me, Louise.
Thank you.
I think there's something, isn't there, about how schema therapy brings us as humans, as therapists or coaches, brings us as humans who have our own schemas, our own modes, and that we share that to a degree, not necessarily in terms of sharing lots of detail or personal information about ourselves, but a recognition that we all have schemas and we all have modes and we're human, and that's what we're bringing into the room. with us, and can make schema therapy tiring as well, can't
Yes.
it? To deliver, because we're being very, very present with people.
Scary sometimes.
Yeah.
Can I add something here?
Yeah.
So I'm sorry, I'm always from a cultural perspective. So
Great. That's what we
hope
want you
it's
here
okay.
for, to hear it.
Because this resonates so much with me and remind me of the early days when I learned and applied schema therapy. I love this model and I'm learning from an individual perspective too, right? So when I apply it, and the most difficult thing is you're trying to be real and authentic and even a little vulnerable. And your client doesn't get it. You know, in the collectivistic backgrounds, clients, they don't get it. They don't believe it. They don't feel it. You feel you are bringing your most authentic self there, but it doesn't penetrate. So I come to gradually get that, you know, something I assume doesn't exist right there. For example, I assume I deliver enough the non-judgmental attitude in the therapy session, but maybe it's still not enough. You know, the way that I'm trying my best to be non-judgmental. But when the client doesn't feel it in their life, all their white life they grow up, they with lots of standard, rigidity, rules, they don't feel it. They assume that you are saying it with a reason, you are just being nice, you are not being real here. Of course, you say so, I pay you, whatever reason that they can think about. So it's like I feel so hurt to begin with. Like I feel I'm mistook as well. So I feel like that's a process for me to learn about how to build those things. It may be actually much longer than I expect.
Yeah, I can really relate to that, Beatrice. Thank you. Because with forensic clients, you know, that they've so often not had the opportunity of any kind of genuine, authentic relationship with somebody without being manipulated or rejected or abused. And so that's their expectation. They're bringing that into the room. And so I think I'm sitting there being all lovely and warm and fluffy and, you know, non-judgmental. And all the time they're somehow it gets mistranslated because of my schemas and their schemas. And they're sitting there thinking, right, at what point is she going to switch and reveal that she's a traitor? You know, and so I have to hold that in mind and might even name that in a session and say, I'm imagining that I'm saying lots of lovely things and you're sitting there thinking, when is she going to abuse me? When is she going to turn on me? And it's so helpful to think about what the client's lived experience is and how that informs how they're receiving my communication and what I need to do to try and help the client with that. And I must say, Beatrice, having heard you describe that, it now makes me think I won't be sitting there alone with that experience because I'm not the only one who experiences that.
Yes, I definitely feel resonated.
Yeah.
Feels like there's a real necessity to be talking about the process within our work, and how we in all of the different settings, you know, how our schemas and our modes lead to us perceiving what's going on for the other person. And so we've got that process, haven't we, that we can link into with schema therapy, where we can start to name some of these things and verbalize some of the fears about how you're presenting and checking them out with your client, checking them out with you, and you checking out with your clients. You know, how is this coming across? So any what would be great now is to get a bit of a sense of a nugget, some kind of golden nugget for people to take away with them from our discussion this afternoon. Maybe it's one of the things that, you know, you've talked about, you're particularly passionate about and have touched on, or something around our discussion that's linked things in together, or something that somebody else has said. So I will start with Beatrice because you look like you're confidently ready to answer that question.
Okay, I'll give it a go. So, the key takeaway, I would say to aware of our assumptions is take a lot of um, courage and being humble and being reflective, willing to challenge ourselves and willing to share power in the therapy room. So this is, I feel like, the key things to happen. Um, and culture is one of the contexts, as Louise has said, right? The clients that you're serving may have other contexts which similarly share as what I have described it in a culture perspective. So those are contexts that we want to understand from the clients because that affect the manifestation of the clients, whatever that symptom, that disorder, or their mode. So I think that's the key message that I wish to deliver. And our clients are usually very willing to educate us, but they don't know what to educate us. So if we can be more humble and ask questions, then you'll feel comfortable of not knowing and asking them that, is there anything that you want to tell me about? Maybe that's difficult to explain. Maybe you think I may not be aware of. They may have a chance to educate us so that we can be even much more emotionally attuned. That's how I feel like a therapeutic relationship should be. Thank you.
I love that. Thank you, Beatrice. Thank you so much. Louise, coming to you. It's your nugget.
Thank you. So looking at it from a involvement in forensic settings perspective, my nugget is supervision. Which might sound really kind of like boring, but honestly, it is the most essential element if you're going to be working within those settings, which are really toxic and schema perpetuating, then having a decent supervisor that understands schema therapy is essential. And Jill was my supervisor and helped me survive all manner of things. But she brought that wonderful limited reparenting approach to the supervision, which enabled me to become more authentic as a person, as well as more resilient as a therapist. So that's my little nugget.
Thank you, Louise. Rob, how about you?
Yeah, for me, it's the combination of attunement, self-attunement, and also attunement with the client, and then keeping the schema model in mind, both the mode model and the schema model itself. So, something's not working in the sessions that's happened, something's off. And then you can feel it, you can sense it, and you can see it in the way people behave and interact and also do the activity that we're doing. And what I've really found so useful is to just hold that in mind and then just go away and just think either in the moment or elsewhere later on, and also through supervision, what's going on with these? Oh, it's actually that schema could be going off, and there could be these modes going off in me and in the client, or different modes, different combinations. And I found so many moments where I've been able to just take a new direction. The schema model has really given me such insight, and then I've been able to have clarity and a sense of energy and motivation, and then understand the issues that maybe the client is facing, and then actually apply a different method, see which maybe need is unmet, and how we can work together in the session to meet that. But it all really starts with that attunement and then keeping that model in mind.
So important. Thank you, Rob. And Jill, from you.
So mine is, don't do this alone. Schema therapy is an experiential, relational model. It's got loads to it. People are really complicated. It's quite an ambitious project much of the time in really trying to help people meet their core needs, find their ways, help be alongside them, finding their ways with life. This is all big stuff. And if the last hour talking to you guys, teaching me anything, it's like, do it together. Have therapy, have supervision, talk to colleagues, be open about the dilemmas you're facing, the things that you find scary and hard in the work. And then it becomes an enriching, fascinating, ever-evolving process, and it feels much safer relationally. And I think we can then model that be like that with our clients in an authentic way, rather than a kind of pretend containment that I know I can get into on my bad days in therapy. So yeah, don't do it alone.
Thank you, Jill. And I think that's a really lovely note to end our panel discussion on as well, in terms of don't do it alone. It's been great having all of you here to hear your different perspectives, and to also think about everybody who's contributed to the day today, which is about sort of getting schema therapists together, getting schema therapy ideas together and sharing. And I think that's one of the things that the schema therapy community does really well, is to share really generously. And so thank you, all of you, for sharing really generously this afternoon in our panel discussion, and sharing openly and vulnerably. So I really appreciate all of you coming and joining me, especially. It's a dark Friday afternoon now. So that brings us to the end of our day, our programme for the UK in terms of World Schema Therapy Day. So I hope that everybody has really enjoyed the contributions. I thank every presenter and panellist, everybody who's promoted the event. My co-hosts Dylan and Nusaria, who've been in the background keeping things going and helping me when I've had tech difficulties. Thank you everybody so much for coming along, and I hope those of you that have joined us and didn't know much about schema therapy or knew little bits have taken away some nuggets and some inspiration, and that you will kind of join us in our schema therapy community. So thank you everybody. There will be recordings, and there are also the ISST YouTube channels where there's more free schema therapy workshops, so there's lots for you to get your teeth into. But thank you everybody so much for joining us, and now is the time to say goodbye. So thank you.
Thank you,
everybody.
Jo.
Thank you, Jo.
Thank you so much,
so
Jo.
much.
So much, Jo.
Together.
Very welcome. Okay, bye everybody.
Bye.
Like,
Bye.
thank you.
Bye.